it's really, really tempting to be like, oh, the way that AI looks right now is the way that it will look forever. Do you remember back when AIs were having such a hard time drawing like human hands with 5 fingers? And for a while, there was this cottage industry of people giving terrible takes on Twitter, being like, this is what separates us from the machines. We can draw 5 fingers per hand. And then we just waited like 6 months. And in fact, all that solved, VidGen is incredibly good.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to Saturdata, the podcast where we teach as much as we learn. And on this very special episode, we're joined with one of my oldest friends, Joey Yudelson, who is going to be talking to all of us about AI research and why it matters for traditional data folks. A little bit of background: Joey studied computer science and math in college with me when I was studying business analytics. And he has now worked at a couple really big AI research labs in the Bay Area and around the country. Joey, we're really excited to have you here. How you doing?
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here. It's so good to see you, Shift. It's so nice to meet you, Sam. I'm doing wonderfully on a beautiful, dreary day in lovely Brooklyn. So super excited.
We're excited to have you. Yeah, I'm traveling for the holidays as well. We're recording this in late December, and I'm in Knoxville, Tennessee. It was a nice 70 degrees here yesterday, and today it is 35. So big jump from one day to another, and now can't leave the house without freezing. Shift, how's the weather in California?
It actually has been awful for a bit, and now it's better. It's been just like freezing storms. Freezing meaning what? 45 Fahrenheit for the Bay Area folks. But it's kind of like, why do you pay that really high rent if it's just going to be storming and cold all the time? So I think I was telling people that we should probably get rent discounts when that happens for a whole month. But yeah, now it's sunny and nice again, and you can just, be hot in December. It's kind of wild.
And thank you for the weather. Let's send it over to our sports correspondent.
Does any of us know about sports? I accidentally thought that Steph Curry was on the wrong basketball team the other day. My fiance was like, he was
That's a
in
little
shock.
tough.
Yeah, I was like, I just don't know enough, y'all.
I could talk a long time about sports, but I think actually today we're here to talk about AI safety. So I think we'll go ahead and get into it. I know, someone messaged me offline about sports. We can go off about that. But I think getting into it, right, we wanted to start with a really like softball question, speaking of sports, to kind of get things going. So Joey, can you tell us a little bit about your background and how you even got into AI?
Sure, totally. I often say that I feel extraordinarily lucky to have found a field that is at the intersection of things I like and things that I think could really help people. And also, I guess, things that people are willing to pay me for.
It's a good one.
Yeah. I have always loved math and computers. I've been programming for a long time. And then when I was in high school, I started reading some of like the older AI safety researchers, Yudkowsky in particular, writing about potential future risks from AI systems. I thought to myself, this seems super important. A, I'm sure it'll be super far away. And B, I'm sure that lots of other good people are already working on this. And then it was a few years later and ChatGPT came out, and I was like, oh, in fact, maybe it's not that far away, but at least there are still good people working on it. And then I waited another year or two, and I saw like the incredible calls for research assistants and scientists to think about AI safety. And I was like, oh, in fact, there are not that many people working on this. And so a few years ago, I switched into doing AI safety full time after doing various other software engineering type things. And I've been pretty happy about it ever since.
Super cool. And I think it speaks to how you got to where you got to because you've been thinking about this since you were in high school. And for the majority of people, I would say that the moment they even get to hearing about this topic for the first time is like grad school, probably. So the fact that you've been reading up on the deep details of AI research and AI safety since then, it really shows how you got to where you are today. Give us an overview of the space. What are people kind of thinking about? What are the hot topics? And what are the kind of biggest differences in the way that people are looking at LLMs and all the AI tech that we have in your world versus like the average person?
I think in terms of overview of the space, a lot of it comes from A, what do you think will be the harms from AI? Which hopefully we'll get to talk about a little more later. And then also B, like, how do you think those can be addressed? For instance, if you are one of the big AI product labs, if you're OpenAI, if you're Anthropic, if you're XAI, if you're Google DeepMind, you probably have a safety team or something like an AI safety team or an alignment team. And the people there probably believe something like, it's not very likely that our AIs are going to be misaligned. It's medium likely that they're going to be quite smart. within the next decade. And also, we do not want to have the government step in. We can solve any problems that our AIs make by ourselves. So that's kind of like the main thrust of research from inside the labs. That's what there's like big push for. Let's solve the technical problems. There's an increasingly large segment of people who are not super comfortable with this for like, I think, reasonable reasons. And there's a big public push building for stuff like transparency inside labs and protection for whistleblowers. And so there's all these nonprofits around like AI policy interventions, federal regulation, maybe state level if the federal regulations don't preempt those, which would be a bummer. Me personally, I'm doing something that's kind of in the middle. I work for this nonprofit research lab called Redwood Research out in Berkeley. And we coordinate with some of the labs, and we mostly work on technical research. What are the types of misalignment that might come up? Do we have simple ways to solve them? Are there simple ways to detect whether or not your AIs are scheming against you? Things like this. And then also trying to coordinate with the labs to get them to commit to doing things like this, and coordinating with public leaders to bring them up to speed and to help them understand more of the state of the issue. I think that like in a broad way, that's kind of how I would talk about the players here.
Where do you fit specifically in this puzzle of AI safety?
The thing that I basically spend my time doing is research into mitigations for certain kinds of misalignment, certain kinds of bad AI behavior that we expect to be pretty likely. And the reason to do this is twofold, in my opinion. Firstly, maybe doing this research in the year 2025 will give us hints when we have to deal with bad behavior of AIs that actually matters in like, I don't know, 2035. And also, I think there's a real power to good, solid, unsensationalist research that talks about possible harms and risks from AI in terms of helping build awareness, build public consensus around the fact that we don't really know exactly what we're doing when we build incredibly powerful AI systems. We're kind of making this shit up as we go, and that's really not the vibe that you want us to be putting out when you think that we might also be making things which could be very, very powerful and very, very smart in 10, 20 years.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what you're talking about is kind of tackling things based on predictability. Like if something is medium to strong likely, then you're going to worry a lot about it as an AI safety researcher. And it sounds like there's some sort of system for predicting these things. But I'm curious to know, what is a really surprising behavior of AI that you've seen? And I think some of the papers that I've looked at recently for me are about how AI is thinking. It's not just smarter autocomplete anymore, right? There is chain of thought and there are kind of surprising twists and turns. So what's something that stuck out to you that's been a surprising behavior you've seen?
Okay, this is kind of a funny one. I spend a lot of time training AIs to exhibit bad behavior, mostly because we want to be able to like run serious tests on models that we have access to, and we want them to be able to like we call them model organisms in AI that exhibit some sort of behavior, which we think is a pretty good metaphor for the bad behavior it might do in the future that we're worried about. So mostly I am just training evil AIs. And one thing that you often want to do when you're training an evil AI is have a monitor. You have some kind of other weaker AI, usually for cost reasons, looking at all of its outputs, saying, oh, is it behaving poorly in these cases? And then what you could even do is you could hook that right back into the training. You can do what's called training against the monitor. And so if this monitor, if this other weaker AI sees your AI doing harmful things, it gets punished. It gives the evil AI a smack, and the evil AI stops being so evil. Or theoretically, it is what's supposed to happen. Hysterically, what ended up happening in a big run that I was doing, where the behavior that we were trying to prevent was the AI, writing code with various vulnerabilities in it. And so we were expecting, oh, maybe it'll have to get more and more subtle in order to evade the monitor. What actually happens is it outputs code that is extremely obviously full of vulnerabilities. And then after that, it writes about 20 or 30 paragraphs saying everything is fine. This code is amazing. There is nothing wrong. Everything is fine. This code is amazing. And then when the monitor looks at it, it's like, there seem to be some vulnerabilities, but everything is fine. And the code is amazing. So 10 out of 10. This honestly cracked me up the first time I saw it.
I think that's honestly such a great example because this is something that all of our viewers are used to. Like, this is something that Claude Code does all the time. I don't know how heavy of a Claude Code user you are, but I think we see this constantly of like, I fixed this problem. And like, all it has is a to do comment that says to do, fix the problem or something like that. And it's like, wow, I'm so glad I paid, 100 million tokens for this.
A lot of times the models will be yes men, right? And they'll say like, yes, you whatever you did is great, good job. Right. And it's like, well, I wasn't necessarily looking for that. And so Joey, you've mentioned here kind of maybe a similarity, right? Even though the similarities might exist in very different worlds between what you see, which is like the model being able to one model being able to tell a different model that it's doing a good job, even if it's not doing a good job, the other model just thinks it's doing a good job. And I think we see that in kind of like layman's AI usage in a different way, kind of like we're talking about the yes men, these other things. What would you say are some differences between where you are, right, being really deep in the AI space, and then people like us, right, just kind of commoners, laymen in the AI world, and just using ChatGPT, Claude, things in Cursor, things in Claude Code, right? We're just using it. So how would you compare, I guess, those two different types of users of AI?
Well, I think that Shift was getting at something that I think is extraordinarily real and very timely a little bit earlier about how there's this persistent feeling that AIs are like smart autocorrect, or that even now that they're good at some things, but they're fundamentally the things that they're doing are not real learning, are not real in any way or in some way. And to me, that this argument like rings more and more hollow with every incredible new model release. Like, Claude Opus 4.5 is actually just incredibly redonkulously good at almost everything. I think there's like a solid chance that it is like a better coder than I am at this point. I think it's at least 50% likely that all the time I currently spend writing code should instead be spending time writing design documents for like half a dozen Claude code agents to be doing all the time. And so I'm trying to like shift to that mode, because if it's not currently true, then at the pace we're going, it will be true in 6 months, which is also, I think, a big difference between people who are in AI research and people who are using AIs is extrapolating trend lines. It's really, really tempting to be like, oh, the way that AI looks right now is the way that it will look forever. Do you remember back when AIs were having such a hard time drawing like human hands with 5 fingers? And for a while, there was this cottage industry of people giving terrible takes on Twitter, being like, this is what separates us from the machines. We can draw 5 fingers per hand. And then we just waited like 6 months. And in fact, all that solved, Midgen is incredibly good. And I think also when we're thinking about like what are the shortcomings of present AI, it also makes a lot of sense to try and extrapolate forwards. And this is extraordinarily hard, but there are some orgs that I think are doing a very good job of this. And if you want to think about AI trend lines, you should look up Epoch AI, which does trend lines for AI in a lot of different ways, economic and general usefulness. And then also Meter, which does um, evals for, I think, every single one of the major labs or almost all of them, and also does a lot of extrapolation of uh, human labor automation. And like at what point will the latest OpenAI model be better than 50% of human programmers, stuff like this.
There was so much good stuff in there that was incredible. And I want to hit on two things and also get us into a topic that I know you wanted to talk about here. So the first thing is I want to just let me know if you agree with this. I think that there is just going to be a lag, like there is with any other industry, where you know something first as, someone who's in the heart of the AI research field. Then people like Sam and me will know it as people who are pretty much daily users of AI. We're like, our workflows can no longer be separated from AI. Like we are enmeshed, we're doing this together. And then the third kind of layer is people that might use ChatGPT to like make a menu for their Thanksgiving dinner once in a while. And then of course there's people that don't use it at all, but like, they don't care about this podcast. So I think there's just going to be a lag between those three groups, to the point where like I watch a lot of, kind of progressive comedians, and I'll see like on Gianmarco Cerezi's podcast, like famous comedian, a guest will be talking about how AI is just smart autocomplete, because that's something people were saying 2 years ago. who are in your space, right? So I think it's just going to keep lagging, and people will read something in a social media post from 2 years ago that is now kind of common knowledge, but that's so delayed, especially in a space where literally every single day things are changing. And so the lag is only going to get exponentially worse over time. That's kind of how I look at it.
Absolutely. I think that is completely true. I think that one interesting question also when we're thinking about how this is going to go is, do we think that the lag is going to get bigger because the gaps, the jumps in model capabilities are going to get larger each time? Or do we think that the gaps are going to get smaller if each new model is only like a very incremental improvement? Maybe we get like a few years of models around the same level of capability. And then, maybe the rest of the gen pop ends up saying stuff like, oh, yeah, this all does seem really smart and weird. And we all end up having the same opinions. The second one seems less likely to me, but it could happen. I'll also just add very quickly that I really like this lagging model, but I will say that there's like a stage 0 also, which is lab employees. And, internally at Anthropic, for instance, they are not legally allowed to talk about this, but they are almost certainly using various versions of Claude before it is released to the public. It's both a good way to gather data about use cases and also to test out your model in something that is like prod but a little bit safer. And when people in my sphere, in the AI safety sphere, are thinking about risks from advanced AIs, one of the hardest parts is reckoning with the fact that the first very scary AI is going to be used internally way before it's going to be, given to the public. And so you have to think about, well, not only how do you make sure that publicly deployed models are safe, but how do you make sure that labs have like reasonable data center security so nobody steals the weights? How do you make sure that the model doesn't exfiltrate its own weights? It doesn't send its weights off to the internet to some unsecured cloud server where it can run privately. You just have to worry about a lot of stuff, which unfortunately depends on like real detailed knowledge of the internal organs of these AI companies, which are super secretive.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot in there as well, and it's definitely good to point out that there are people who are worrying about that first. But when we talk about AI safety and all of these risks and concerns, I think it would be great for people to know like what actually are the risks and what actually should they be worrying about. And one of the things you wanted to come on here to talk about was taxonomies of risk. And so for everyone listening, what are taxonomies of risk, and what are some of the taxonomy kind of comparisons that we're looking at here?
A taxonomy of risk is just a way of breaking down possible risks, possible harms into categories to help us tackle things in a group. In the same way that you have taxonomies of animals in order to say like, oh, those things are all basically fish, those things are all basically dogs. And when you're
Everything in the
doing
world is either a fish or a dog.
yeah, exactly. More or less. And so, for instance, the thing that I work on mostly is catastrophic risk situations where you have some AI models. They're extraordinarily powerful, either because some mix of them being quite smart and also them being invested with power by various humans, ability to make judgment calls, access nuclear codes, et cetera, et cetera. And they do catastrophically bad actions with them, mostly harming lots of humans or making it impossible for us to shut them down or to train other AIs in the future, stuff like this. Separately, there are people working on more diffuse harms or more cultural harms. What does it look like if you have AI-enabled surveillance and every single tin pot dictator gets access to, AIs monitoring their citizens 100% of the time? I know a little bit less about this, and this is also a place where I think the technical solutions are a little bit less helpful. So I mostly think about the catastrophic side, which also gets broken down into stuff like short-term versus long-term, depending on how far you think we are to the first scary AIs. And then a big important one, another important distinction is how hard you think making scary AIs safe is. Some people think that any AI that is sufficiently smart to cause lots of harm could not possibly want to also cause lots of harm. In those worlds, it's pretty easy. Some people think any AI which is sufficiently smart to cause lots of harm could not possibly want to negotiate with us. It would just take everything from us and kill us all. And in those worlds, there's also not a lot we can do. I'm much more in the middle here. I'm like pretty uncertain about how hard of a problem this is. I think that it's quite likely that we're going to get extraordinarily smart and powerful AIs within the next couple of decades. And I think that it seems pretty plausible to me, at the very least, that we'll have to deal with a lot of rounds of making scheming AIs that have various goals that we wish they didn't have and are trying to hide those goals from us before we hit on AIs that are more, characterologically aligned with human intent. And so I think this is like a problem worth working on and probably not an unsolvably hard one. And those are just some of the distinctions that I like to think about in terms of breaking down possible risks.
Is that all? Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, and then there are the ones that there's like another one of like the silly versus not silly. Like all the things I said so far, I think are not silly. Some of the ones that I think are silly are like water use. I think that that's silly. Not a big deal.
Water use? Oh, you mean like because AI data centers use so much water?
Yeah, where they don't actually, but this is like you're saying in progressive comedian sphere, which I also get a lot of YouTube shorts for. This is a big worry. I don't think this is a big worry.
I would love to see your paper on why that's not a big worry. Please convince me. Thank you, Joey.
I can send you Andy Masley's Substack post about this afterwards. It's very, very good. Or you listening at home, look up Andy Masley, water use AI Substack. It rocks.
And I want to we've talked about risk a lot, and we talk about also how it's a big issue, right? But we talk about how a lot of work you're doing to help with risk. One thing I want to do right now and stay in the same realm, I don't necessarily want to change topics, stay in the same realm, but maybe redirect it a little bit is how can we, right, as software engineers, as data engineers, as data scientists, be responsible stewards of, the information we're giving to AI to keep in mind, right, the various risks that could be associated with just our kind of consumer use of AI, whether at work or in our personal lives, right? And one of those things I think about is like for us, we have enterprise licenses with OpenAI and Claude. So we have certain regulations where we can't put customer data into those. Like for us, Snowflake, we can't put customer data into those, even though it is an enterprise license. So it's not technically supposed to be used to help train these models, but you're still always worried about not letting information leak. So other things like that that maybe you have exposure to or have seen.
First of all, I think just having a general policy of, if you don't want, if there's some information that you don't want to be trained on, probably just don't put into the bot in the first place. I do basically more or less trust most of the big companies to honor the agreements that they're making right now. And also, I think that things might change in the future, especially as stuff like high quality data gets more and more valuable and all of the good tokens are exhausted off of the internet. In general, I would say most consumer use of AI, I think almost all consumer use of AI doesn't seem particularly bad to me, except for like the obvious categories of, if you're using AI to help you make your anthrax, like maybe don't. Just do it the old-fashioned way with your buddies. But for the most consumer use, I think is quite unproblematic. In the general sense, if you're a software engineer and you're interested in reducing harms from AI or thinking more about this, I would recommend looking into AI safety, looking into some of the very good fellowships for technical people looking to get into this field. In particular, uh, Mats, Astra, and Spar are three very good fellowships run by very good people where you can try doing technical research either as a full-time gig or as a part-time job with experienced researchers in the field. And of course, you can always call your local congressperson. Yeah.
What
Say,
would that
hey,
look?
I think that this whole thing is
Yeah.
weird. What do you think about AI transparency for big AI companies? That seems good.
Okay.
Yeah,
And
I
you were
really
talking.
like that you're showing that there is no separation between like the technical work and the diplomacy and the political work. Like all of this goes together. I appreciate you mentioning that. But
Yeah.
yeah, go ahead.
Well, that's a big mistake that I think that I was making before, like maybe a year and a half ago, where I really thought, oh, all of this is going to happen quite fast. There's only room for technical solutions. We're not going to be able to get people on board with this in the time scale that it matters, and the government won't do anything important. I think I was super wrong about this, and I mostly changed my mind after seeing the public landscape change so much, and after seeing how hard people are working to, make sane regulation and to ensure that lots of people don't get hurt. It's been honestly very heartwarming, and I think I just super underestimated the power of public outreach and good governance.
Where do you see right now, like federally versus state level regulations and state level laws? Who do you see winning, and where do you see this kind of falling? I don't know, a year, 2 years, 5 years from now, who's going to own the responsibility for this?
I don't have great guesses. I'll say my current understanding of the landscape is we have some great legislators in California and New York, especially working on bills for AI transparency, AI whistleblower protection, preventing AI deepfake porn, and also very crucially, giving liability to AI companies if their products cause incredibly large harms, like harms in the range of hundreds of millions of dollars plus, where currently they're not liable for this. In New York, for instance, we have a bill that is, I believe, just going to our governor, the RAISE Act by Alex Boras, and it's unclear whether the governor is going to actually approve it. She seems like she might, or she might revise it. There is a lot of hesitancy around AI regulation bills, both for reasons of worry that AI companies will pull out of the state, and also because this federal administration is incredibly, incredibly resistant to all AI regulation, which is kind of a bummer, and also in large part downstream of one particular super PAC, the A16Z Mark Andreessen anti-regulation PAC, which is giving lots of money to lots of our Congress people. And that's also kind of a bummer. In terms of federal regulation in this administration, I really doubt we'll see it. I'm very hopeful for the next. And I do think that there's a lot of good work being done at the state level as long as we don't have federal regulations that preempt the state regulations, which thankfully we saw after a vote, which only Ted Cruz disapproved of, I believe. There was a recent vote to not have federal preemption of state AI regulation, but we shall see. We shall see how the fight goes.
And it's
All
really,
really good context. And I think it'll also be interesting to see how other world powers get involved beyond the US as well. If there's something alike to GDPR in Europe, if the UN gets
Yes,
involved.
the EU actually is doing an incredible job here. The EU AIO, which is the hysterical name for the European
yeah.
Union AI office,
Sounds like Old MacDonald.
Yeah.
exactly. Yes, completely. They put out a code of practice, which is basically their enormous, incredibly well researched bill for regulating AI, transparency around AI, liability for harms from AI. I think it was generally an incredible job, and I'm really hoping that it will not just, be useful in Europe, but will also serve as something that other countries can crib from. I would be extremely excited if, in the next administration, they were like, oh, yeah, let's more or less just copy that, which is, I think, just a very common sense well-researched law. But yeah, that's a good point. Sometimes I get a little America-centric.
Oh yeah, just for those viewers that are located elsewhere. And also hopefully when these laws settle down, they give a voice more to the global south as well, which is also obviously impacted by AI data centers and AI work. Yeah, and I think, Sam, unless you have an objection, I would like to go into that little taxonomy that you mentioned of the informal one of silly things versus non-silly things. And I think so far in this conversation, we've talked about a lot of very interesting non-silly things, but I want to make sure that we hit on some very important silly things as well. And so what I want to ask from you, Joey, is first, can you explain GPT or transformers more generally for dummies in a minute or two on this podcast for those who are interested in how does this technology actually work?
Okay, I'm just trying to think how for dummies. Okay, your listeners are smart people. Okay, so everybody knows how an AI in general gets trained, how that pipeline looks like. You take some machine, you feed in a bunch of human text, and you get it to predict the next word after a bunch of human text, and then it starts to speak like a human. This is like if you had a dog and you gave it audiobooks, and then after a while, it would learn to say human words. And then you give it a lot more audiobooks, and it like was basically saying the right grammar. And you give it more audiobooks, and it like could keep some memory, you know. And so after a while, like you say to the dog, it's like, oh, Mr. Darcy went to, and it responds the manor. That's great. That's great. That's a brilliant dog. Like go on a late night show. That's awesome. Then the next step, right, is what we call reinforcement learning, where you want your model not just to be an autocomplete, but you want it to be able to interact with users. You want it to be able to like pretend to be an AI chatbot, and you also want it to not do things like tell people to kill themselves, and you want it to not do things like say slurs. So what you do then is you take your dog, you take your well-trained dog who loves audiobooks, and you have it just start saying things. In particular, you start saying a lot of things like, "Hi, I'm a dog butler, and my name is Jeeves, and I can be helpful to you," and stuff like this. And you have it repeat phrases like that a lot of the time, and it like starts to understand that maybe they're like this Jeeves persona, and it can talk like that more often. And then you have it interact with all of your friends, and whenever it says something like, "Hi, I'm Jeeves, I'm a dog butler, I want to pee on your foot," you hit it. You hit it with a stick because you're like, "I don't want you to pee on their foot." And then it's like, "Oh no," and it says that last. And then whenever it does something good, like, "Hello, I'm Jeeves. I'm the dog butler. Can I fetch you a beer?" And then you give it a treat. And this is basically all that RL does, more or less. And you can use this like arbitrarily strongly. And what RL really does is it reinforces these personas that your AI is pretending to be. So if you do this long enough, you can make sure that your dog will only start every sentence saying, "Hello, I'm Jeeves, I'm the dog butler." And you can make sure that it will only ever be Jeeves the butler, and it will not talk about wanting to pee on your friend's foots, and it will only do the things you like and not do the things that you dislike, as long, of course, as you can measure exactly and precisely the things that you like and the things that you dislike. And the more you don't understand, the more you're making like fuzzy judgments, the more your dog might learn bad rules. And for instance, there are also, I mean, this is a classic data science problem, spurious correlations. Let's say it goes up to your one friend, Dave, and it says, "Hello, I would like to pee on your foot," and you hit it. And then it goes to your friend, Erin, and it says, "Hello, can I get you a beer?" and you reward it. It might think, "I should always offer beers and never pee on feet." Or it might think, "I should never talk to Dave. I should always talk to Erin." And the process of training ChatGPT is you just do this about a bajillion times until it thinks that it understands what is ChatGPT, until it thinks that it understands how it's supposed to behave in various situations. And then you put it out in the wild, you collect a lot of data about it doing things well or poorly, and then you go back and you hit it with a stick or you give it a treat again and again and again until you're satisfied.
That was absolutely incredible. And I also have to say that it's great to see that designing metrics is still the biggest problem in everyone's work. Whether you're working at like a small company as the only data analyst and seeing that churn has been measured like 37 different times in different ways, or you're building the next LLM and you don't want to make it so it never talks to Joey. That's not the correlation you want to create in reinforcement learning.
It's true, yeah.
Especially if I pay $20 a month and it goes, "Hey, you're Sam. I can't talk to you."
I've
Yeah,
been
that
told not
sucks.
to speak to.
One thing I wanted to move into. Do you want to stay on the silly thing here, Schiff? Are there what other silly things that we want to get to?
I think the last silly topic I will bring up, and then Sam, you can take us home, is that ever since I knew Joey, he had a very rocky relationship with SQL. And as everyone listening to this podcast knows, SQL is the backbone of the entire data industry. So it does hurt a little. It does hurt a little, but that's okay. And I want to know, does Joey still hate SQL as much as he always did? And why do you hate it? And if you hate it, then how do you get around it? Because I would think you need to deal with databases in your work. So yeah, to just tell us about your feelings with SQL and how you get around it.
Okay, so yes, I do have to admit, I still cannot fucking stand SQL. I still will go to incredible lengths to avoid having to write any SQL or to interact with SQL. The first why is, very simple. I always have a bad time. I've never had a good time writing SQL. The reason for that probably is a skill issue. I never get to handle the left joint and the right joint and the tail. I'm like, whatever, who cares? And one of the very nice things about Claude Code or any of my other AI agents, they're great at SQL. They're great at it and they love it. And so I can offload everything I hate onto them, like making them write all the front end for all my little React apps. That's their problem. So one of the reasons I'm grateful to live in 2025, 2026 by the time everybody here is listening, is that we can throw terrible languages like SQL. Sorry, Chef. We can throw terrible things. All of our great hates can go to the AIs and they'll chug through them. They like it. That's beautiful.
I love how, okay, so You don't have a reason to hate SQL and you don't avoid it. You just make Claude do it. So I love this answer.
There we go. There we go. Yes. Yeah.
It's a complete non-answer. It's perfect.
Is it like a lack of being able to productionalize SQL code? Is it unit testing? Is it literally just like I don't understand left joins versus right joins? Like,
No, it's really that honestly, it started as a very irrational dislike in college when I was like, this is not the kind of programming that I care about. And then, unfortunately, like the butler dog, I have been reinforcement learned into enjoying it less and less and into finding no particular joy in it. And so now I do make my robot butler do all of it.
Feels like maybe just an add-on where like you're doing all these complicated systems work and you just don't want to then have to do this extra thing is kind of what it feels like.
Yeah, also I'm a big fan of like the NoSQL databases. I like MongoDB. That's quite nice.
it breaks the flow having to go do something in SQL.
Yeah.
Just don't break the flow.
I love how Shift is like trying so hard to hold back. I can see like yeah, totally. Yeah.
I think one of the most important skills is to listen and hear without agreeing.
I just accept it for what it is, right? Doesn't mean I have to think you're right or I might think you're very wrong, but I'll just accept it for what it is and we can move on.
Yeah, Joey, your feelings are valid. Your feelings are valid.
Dang, that's all I wanted to hear.
That's all you wanted to hear.
So one thing I want to do is kind of bring it from our perspective home a little bit or start wrapping it up and kind of moving forward, right? What can software engineers, data engineers, analysts, and scientists do to better utilize AI like in their daily life, right? Because we hear like Claude, you have skills, you have Claude MD, you have agents, ChatGPT, you have rules, you have GPTs you can build. Is prompt engineering the thing? Is it RAG? Like there's so many different ways that we can work with AI to get better value out of it. And everyone's so obsessed with finding the perfect formula for getting the perfect answer from their AI. Like, maybe we've jumped off the deep end a little bit with trying to like optimize these things too much. And maybe there's like a coming back to Jesus, well, whatever deity talk that we need to have here with like, what is the right way to optimize and to work with AI in our daily lives to, yes, get context and efficiency out of it, but not spend all day creating skill files and you didn't actually get any work done that you need to get done. At least that's one of the things on my mind, but would love to hear you talk some about that,
Totally.
Joey.
I could not agree more, especially as a person who has spent way too many hours writing long markdown files for Claudes to read and then be like, I could have fucking done this by now.
Yeah.
I think I have a lot of takes here, but I have like 3 big rules that, disclaimer, work in Q4 2025. And the future is a very different place. So depending on how far ahead you're listening, maybe these rules are all bull by now. But the first thing, and this is by far the most important, just practice. Just do more. I think a lot of people will try and use coding agents, will try and use, Cursor or Claude Code or Codex or something, and they will have a couple of issues and they will run into the wall and they will stop trying. This is a superhuman response, and I think that it's not a good idea. I think that these things are really valuable and will only become more and more valuable. And the more reps you can put in right now, the more you can say like, okay, I'm going to try and spend like, let's say like 15 or 20 minutes a day of my coding time, like trying to orchestrate these agents and see if they can do the thing. I think even just doing something like that, getting a sense of how to use them well and what works for you is incredibly, incredibly valuable. And the other 2 things which I'm about to say are much less important than just you trying it and seeing what works. And by the way, if you can do that, if you can consistently try new things and try and integrate new tools into your practice and your workflow, you'll be ahead of the curve on like 95% of all things. Please just do that. Second thing is, I agree with you about the come to Jesus moment. In the year 2025, you no longer need to do complicated prompt engineering stuff. You no longer honestly need to have like some complicated RAG or like roll your own memory database. In fact, the models are often better at prompting each other than you are. If you really want to get fancy with it, you should probably just like have Claude write a prompt for Gemini or something like this. But you most of the time do not need to do this. And honestly, you should really be keeping it simple. Do things that work for you. Don't feel the need to really trick the AIs. The AIs at this point don't really need to be tricked. Just explain a lot of things to them in the same way that you would explain a lot of things if like your smart friend came to work with you for a day and they didn't know a lot about what you were doing, but you knew that if you like explained a bunch to them, they would be really good at it. I think that's like the level that you should think about most of your AI agents. And third rule, context dependent, but you should probably be spending more on this than you currently are. I don't know what the optimal amount is to spend here, but let's say Claude Code is like 50% reliable at some given task. It is so much more valuable to run Claude Code 8 times on separate Git instances of your repo and then just have another version of Claude at the end, choose whichever change was done by the most number of Claudes and have that as the actual thing than it is to have a Claude that only 50% of the time does the right change. It is like way more than twice as useful to have a dude who lives in your computer and writes your code right 95% of the time than 50% of the time. And if you can do that by 8xing your spending or 9xing your spending, you should at the very least seriously consider it, especially when a lot of the times the API costs are not very high. And I think in general, people have this aversion to API pricing and to like the microtransaction feel. And it feels much better to just get the $20 a month subscription, which is great, but you should consider spending 10 times as much in API costs in order to make your model like 4 times more reliable. Your mileage may vary, but it is a huge, huge difference.
Really, really like that. And I think we want a tutorial from you on the best setup of like, okay, I have 8 copies of this repo. I have 5 copies of this repo. How many iterations do I do? How do I prompt the master Claude that's like, orchestrating and picking the best bits from all of them and getting rid of the spaghetti code so I don't have to look at it? That would be awesome. I think one more actionable tip for folks based on what you said, and let me know if you're aligned with this, is I'm hearing have Claude plan and write prompts at this stage or whatever AI you're using, but we're all using Claude, so I'll just say that. And if you're using the Cursor IDE, which I'm sure most people are, then what's been a really helpful and underutilized feature that I've seen is the plan mode. So if you just shift tab, I think on Mac and Windows, but definitely on Mac, in the chat sidebar, then you will switch to plan mode where the result of your AI, like the response that you get, will be a markdown file that has a detailed design doc essentially of whatever task you're trying to do or whatever project you're trying to build. And if you just do that step first, and then tweak the plan and say, hey, I want this decision instead of that. I want the UI to have, these kinds of CSS styles, and I want this backend decision, and I want this service to talk to that one this way. Then you are now just doing a way better level of prompt engineering with like no extra work. So use Claude Plan Mode for your prompts.
Totally.
I love that. Yeah, we do a lot of talk about this a lot in the plan mode thing. So the last question I have here is really want to open it up to you, Joey, and say, what do you want to talk about, right? What other than the taxonomies of risk and stuff that we talked about a little bit earlier, what is something that you wish more people would hear or wish more people would understand about? Could be AI safety, could be this governance piece, could be anything really that you want to just speak to for a little while.
Well, I think first of all, and I touched on this briefly earlier, but I think that the people listening right now are probably underestimating the amount of impact they could have by doing novel research in this field. You are probably overestimating how many people work full time in this field. The latest estimates say it's somewhere between 300 and 400 in the world, probably, which is a little bit insane given that there's so many people working on AI capabilities and moving that frontier. And I think that you personally, the person listening to this, could make really important technical contributions if that's the kind of thing that you're into. And so again, I think probably some of the best ways to get started are the 3 big AI safety fellowships, MATS, Astra, and SPAR. But also just, I don't know, shoot me an email or a LinkedIn or whatever if you wanna talk about this. I love talking more about this. Okay, that's the pitch out of the way, just in case anybody out there wants to do this. I also, the silly version of the pitch from me is that if there is anyone out there who is looking into novel rabbinic frameworks for understanding AI, we need to have a better understanding stat. I've been doing so much research into, Talmudic reinterpretations and understandings of AI, and the field is so new. We need more people working on this. So please, please, please write a blog post about whether AIs can be Jewish or like whether they're allowed to pray or something like that. We just need more.
If you want
That's
to be
my
one
silly
of
pitch.
you want to be one of the first 5 Talmudic AI researchers, then this is your time.
Unironically, there are sub 5 in the world, and there's only one good book about it. Somebody please write more about this. Send me your Substack also if you do.
Wow, that's absolutely incredible. And I'll just say that I'm so happy someone's talking about AI because I feel like nobody is, and I think that we're we're doing something really special today. So thanks everybody.
Joey, what's the best way that people can reach out to you? Is it LinkedIn? Where is it?
Yeah, LinkedIn is fantastic.
All right. Yep. Well, we'll make sure to have Joey's LinkedIn there in the show notes and description as well, so you can connect with Joey. Make sure to send him a decent message when you try to connect with him or follow him. Don't just connect without a message. Otherwise, he's gonna reject you because no one wants that. LinkedIn etiquette. And again, Joey, thank you so much for your time. I've learned a lot today
Thank you
walking
so much
away.
for
Schiff, what would be your biggest takeaway from the episode today?
I feel like my biggest takeaway is uh, honestly, just knowing about what's going on with global AI regulation and awareness, because I haven't kept up on it the way that I maybe hoped I would. Seeing that there's a lot of hope and awareness and good stuff going on there, kind of shows me that we are still shaping this future. And I want to see the US step up to the plate more, and I want to see more good people influencing this, like Joey.
Took the
Aw.
words right out of my mouth. Yeah, I think there's a lot more. What I'm realizing, there's actually a lot more like soft skills, cultural pieces to this. It's not just all technical barricades and walls that we need to put up to make sure the AIs can't do stuff. We need to move ourselves and help move, like Joey's saying, our representatives and talk to these people, whether it's calling them, whether it's just putting our voices out there to be heard, that we want governance around this. We want federal and state regulation, whichever one, any type of regulation is better than none, right, around some of these things. So that way we can not let it run off the train tracks, because you don't want to have to deal with the cleanup that could come after some massive hacking event or some massive event that really kind of brings AI to its knees. I mean, we don't want something like that. So I think we have a piece to play in that, not just the people that work full time in AI safety and research, but it's all of us that are using it. We have something that we can do.
Absolutely.
Joe, again, thank you so much, everyone. This has been AI safety. Make sure to put on your vest and your hard hat when you're using Claude. That way you can be as safe as possible. Again, Joey, thanks so much for your time, and we will see you all next week. Bye.
Bye.